The first thing Jesse said to me was not hello. His voice came through my phone low and shaky, nearly swallowed by the empty hum of a summer afternoon. "Mr. Whitmore," he whispered, "is anyone supposed to be inside your daughter's house right now?" I was standing in my garage, with a box of old Christmas lights in my hands. For one quiet second, I thought I had misheard him. "No," I said. "Clara is supposed to be on a plane." Behind him, I heard the lawn mower shut off. Then there was nothing but wind, distant traffic, and the faint buzz of insects. Then I heard it, a small cry. Not the cry of a grown woman. Not the sound of a television. It was thin, tired, and frightened, like a child trying to be brave and failing. Jesse breathed into the phone. "That's what I keep hearing. It sounds like it's coming from under the house." Everything inside me went cold. My daughter's house was supposed to be empty. The doors were supposed to be locked. The curtains were supposed to be closed. Clara had called me that morning from the airport, thanked me for checking on the house while she was away, and told me she loved me. That was at 8:07. By 2 in the afternoon, a stranger was standing in her yard, telling me someone was crying below her house. I dropped the box of lights. Glass bulbs cracked across the concrete. "Do not go inside," I told Jesse. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice before I made it to the truck. Clara was 38 years old, but she was still my little girl in the way daughters never really stop being. I had watched her learn to ride a bicycle on the same street where I still lived. I had watched her bury her mother at 29 and stand straight beside me, while everyone else fell apart. I had watched her marry Evan Mallory, then watched the brightness slowly drain out of her face over 7 years of excuses, apologies, and locked smiles. When she finally left him, I thought the worst part was over. I was wrong. The custody fight over my grandson Liam had turned uglier than any divorce should. Evan wanted control, not fatherhood. He wanted Clara afraid. He wanted the court to believe he was calm and reasonable while she was unstable and emotional. He showed up in pressed shirts and spoke softly to judges. He sent messages that sounded polite unless you knew how to read the blade hidden inside them. Clara read every blade. For months, she had been careful, too careful. She saved screenshots. She checked locks. She asked me not to stop by unannounced because routine matters in custody cases. She smiled when I asked if she was safe, but her eyes moved to the windows before she answered. That morning, when she called from the airport, I could hear the airport noise around her. Suitcase wheels, announcements, people talking over one another. Phoenix for 3 days, she had said. A training conference. My lawyer said it's fine as long as Evan has his normal weekend with Liam. I did not like the idea of Liam staying with Evan, but the temporary order was the temporary order. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm sure," she said too quickly. Then she added, "Dad, if you check the house, don't worry if it looks strange." I packed some things away. Why would it look strange? Just tidying. That was Clara. Always tidying the fear so nobody else had to see it. I had gone by around noon. Her little white house looked normal from the street. The porch was swept. The mailbox was empty. The blinds were drawn against the heat. I watered her ferns, checked the side gate, and walked around back to make sure the storm window near the basement was secure. It was. As I left, I saw a black pickup truck roll slowly past the corner. No front plate that I could see. I noticed it only because it moved too slowly for a street with no traffic. Then I forgot about it. That was the mistake that would sit in my chest for a long time. Jesse was 19, maybe 20. He had mowed my lawn twice before. Quiet kid, polite, worked with headphones in, but always took them out when he spoke to me. I hired him for Clara because her grass had gotten high, and I did not want the neighbors or Evan's lawyer making a story out of it. He had texted me at 1:15. Front yard done. Starting the back. I sent a thumbs up. 45 minutes later, he called. Now I was driving across town faster than an old man should drive, praying to God and cursing myself in the same breath. I called Clara. I called again. Voicemail. I called Evan. Straight to voicemail too. The road seemed longer than it ever had. Every red light felt personal. Every slow driver in front of me felt like another hand closing around my throat. By the time I turned onto Clara's street, Jesse was standing beside the mower in the backyard, one hand on the handle, the other pressed against his chest, like he had been trying to calm his breathing. He looked relieved when he saw me. "I'm sorry," he said before I could speak. I didn't know who else to call. "You did right," I said. "You did exactly right." The house looked peaceful. That was the worst part. White siding, blue shutters, Clara's tomato plants leaning in their cages, a wind chime moving softly over the back steps. Nothing looked like danger. Then the cry came again. Soft, small. Below us. Jesse flinched. I turned toward the back door. It was closed, but the frame looked wrong. Not broken, not forced. Just not quite right. Like someone had opened it and shut it in a hurry. On the ground near the steps, a grocery bag had tipped over in the grass. A banana rolled against my shoe. A box of children's fever medicine lay half out of the bag, along with crackers, apple juice, soup, diapers, and a receipt. The receipt was less than 3 hours old. Someone had bought supplies for a sick toddler. My sick toddler, my grandson. I looked at Jesse. "Did you see anyone come in?" He shook his head. "No, sir, but when I got here, the backyard gate was open a crack." Well, Clara never left gates open. My heart started pounding harder. "We should call the police," Jesse said. He was right. I knew he was right. But then the cry came again, weaker than before, and every reasonable thought left my head. "If Liam is in there," I said, "I'm not waiting outside while he cries." I took the spare key from under the ceramic frog by the flower pot. Clara hated that I knew where it was, but mothers and daughters can have secrets. Fathers and daughters have emergency plans. I unlocked the door. The kitchen smelled like cold soup. That was the first thing I noticed when I stepped inside. Chicken noodle soup, thick and cooled in a pot on the stove. A small plastic cup sat beside the sink. A wet washcloth lay folded over the edge of a bowl. The house was not empty. It was too tidy upstairs, almost staged. The living room shelves looked bare. Family photos were gone from the mantel. Liam's toy basket was missing. Clara's shoes were not by the door. At a glance, the house looked like someone had packed up and left. But if you looked closely, there were signs of life everywhere. One tiny sock under the kitchen table, a spoon in the sink, a half-open drawer where Clara kept batteries and flashlights. A chair pulled slightly away from the wall. Jesse stayed by the back door. "I'll wait here," he said. I nodded. "Call 911 if I yell." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The cry came again, and this time I heard something with it, a woman's whisper. "Shh, baby. I know. My skin prickled from my neck to my wrists. "Clara," I called. The whisper stopped. The hallway ahead of me seemed to narrow. At the end of it, the basement door stood open 2 inches. Clara hated open doors. When she was a little girl, she used to close every cabinet in the kitchen before bedtime. Her mother would laugh and call her the household inspector. Even as an adult, Clara kept things orderly. Doors closed, curtains even, locks checked twice. That basement door hanging open felt like a scream. I pushed it wider. Cool, damp air rose from below. The old wooden stairs creaked under my first step. "Clara," I called again. No answer. Halfway down, I saw something yellow folded on the landing. A blanket. I picked it up and nearly lost my breath. It was the duck blanket. My wife, Margaret, had sewn that blanket before Clara was born. Tiny yellow ducks across soft flannel. She had made it in the winter. Sitting beside the living room window, with her feet tucked under her, telling me our baby would need something cheerful in a world that could be cold. After Margaret died, Clara kept the blanket in a cedar chest in her bedroom. It was not something she left on stairs. I held it tight and continued down. At the bottom, the basement opened in front of me, and my knees almost gave out. The unfinished basement had been turned into a hidden shelter. A mattress lay against the far wall with a pillow and 2 folded quilts. Plastic bins held toddler clothes, diapers, wipes, bottled water, canned food, flashlights, batteries, and medicine. A small lamp sat on a crate, shaded so the light would not shine through the basement windows. Children's books were stacked beside a stuffed rabbit. On a folding table, piles of documents sat in neat rows: police reports, printed messages, photographs, legal letters, and a calendar marked in red ink. This was not chaos. This was planning. Then I saw Liam. My grandson sat on the mattress, cheeks flushed, hair damp with fever, clutching his stuffed rabbit, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. His eyes found mine. "Grandpa," he whispered. A shape moved in the shadows. Clara stepped forward. She wore the same gray sweater she had worn in the photo she sent me from the airport that morning. Her hair was tied back, but loose pieces had fallen around her face. Dark circles sat under her eyes. She looked exhausted, frightened, and relieved all at once. She said, "I could not move. You never left," I whispered. She looked down. "I went to the airport. But you never got on the plane." "No." Liam coughed, and she knelt beside him, touching his forehead with the back of her hand. The movement was so gentle it broke something in me. "Why are you hiding under your own house?" I asked. Clara closed her eyes. "Because it was the only way to keep him safe without breaking the court order." I stared at her. Those words did not belong in a family. They belonged in police statements, in legal filings, in stories about strangers. But there she was, my daughter, hiding in a basement with her sick child, because the system had taught her that fear needed paperwork before it counted. She took a breath and began talking. She told me Evan had been driving past the house for weeks, sometimes at midnight, sometimes at dawn, never stopping, never knocking, just passing slowly enough for her to know he wanted to be seen. She told me he had returned Liam from visitation twice with bruises he called playground bumps. She had taken photos. She had gone to the pediatrician. She had reported everything. Each time, Evan smiled and said Clara was dramatic. Each time, his lawyer said she was trying to poison the court against him. Then, 3 weeks earlier, Evan had leaned into her doorway after dropping Liam off and said, quietly enough that no neighbor could hear, one weekend, "I won't bring him back. And by the time anyone believes you, we'll be gone." My hands curled into fists. "You told the police, Wes." And no recording, no witness. He denied it. I wanted to drive to Evan's house right then. I wanted to put my hands around his perfect collar and shake the truth out of him. Clara saw it on my face. "That," she said softly, "is why I didn't tell you." The words hit harder than I expected. She was not afraid I would ignore her. She was afraid I loved her enough to ruin everything. My attorney filed for an emergency hearing. Clara continued. Monday morning. But until then, Evan still had scheduled visitation this weekend. I was supposed to be out of town. He thought he would have Liam. "So you made the house look empty." She nodded. "I checked in at the airport. I made sure there would be records showing I went. Then I came home through a rideshare, not my car. I brought Liam down here, kept the lights low, and planned to stay hidden until the hearing." I looked around the basement. "Clara, this is dangerous." "I know. You should have come to me." "If I left the house with Liam," she said, "Evan's attorney could claim I kidnapped him or violated the temporary arrangement. If I stayed upstairs and Evan came by, he might know I was home. If I told you, you might confront him. I had no good choices, Dad. I only had the least bad one. Liam started to cry again, weak and tired. Clara picked him up. He pressed his hot face against her shoulder. I'm sorry, she whispered to me. I didn't want you to find out like this. For a moment, I could not speak. My anger was too big, but it had no safe place to go. Then I looked at the documents on the table. Show me everything. Clara hesitated only a second. Then she placed Liam back on the mattress, tucked the duck blanket over his legs, and opened the first folder. The next hour changed the way I saw my daughter. I had always known she was strong. I did not know she had been building a case, while pretending to function like a normal person. There were screenshots of messages from Evan. Most sounded polite if you skimmed them. I hope you're documenting your behavior around Liam. A judge won't like how emotional you are. Mothers who panic usually lose credibility. Then there were the messages he deleted after sending. Clara had photographed them on another device. You think locks stop fathers? Enjoy your last quiet weekend. He'll forget you faster than you think. There were photos of the black pickup on Clara's street. Some from her security camera. Some from a neighbor's doorbell camera. Different nights. Same truck, same slow pass. There were medical notes from Liam's pediatrician. Reports from daycare about how Liam cried when Evan arrived. A statement from a clerk at a gas station where Evan had shouted at Clara during an exchange. A timeline Clara had typed in clean, careful language, as if neat margins could hold back terror. And then there was a recording. Clara unlocked her phone and played it. At first, I heard wind. Then Evan's voice. You keep acting like court papers are magic. They're not. People disappear every day. The Clara's voice on the recording shook. Are you threatening to take Liam? Evan laughed. I'm saying you should enjoy this arrangement while you still can. The recording ended. I looked at Clara. You said there was no recording. There wasn't when I first reported him. This was 2 days ago. Does your lawyer have it? She does. Does Evan know? Clara shook her head. Nope. For the first time that afternoon, something like hope moved through me. Not peace, not comfort, but a sharp, useful hope. Evan thought he was the only one who knew how to plan. He was wrong. Jesse knocked lightly on the basement door frame. Sir. I turned. Everything all right? There's a truck outside. Clara went white. I climbed the stairs faster than my knees wanted me to. From the front window, I saw a black pickup rolling past the house, slow, too slow. The windows were dark, but I could feel the driver looking. It did not stop. It passed the house, turned at the corner, then came around again 2 minutes later. Jesse stood behind me. That's the same truck I saw when I got here. I pulled out my phone and recorded the third pass. This time, the truck slowed in front of Clara's driveway. The driver's window lowered an inch. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered but said nothing. For 3 seconds, all I heard was breathing. Then Evan's voice said, "You're at Clara's house." I looked down the hall toward the basement door. My daughter was hiding below the floor with her sick son, covering his mouth gently so his cough would not give them away. I kept my voice flat. I'm watering plants. You always were too involved. And you always were too fond of driving slowly past houses that aren't yours. A silence. Careful, old man. He hung up. My anger became something colder then. Cleaner. Hot anger makes you reckless. Cold anger makes you useful. I called Daniel Briggs. Daniel had been my friend for 40 years and a sheriff's deputy for 32 of them. Retired now, but not the kind of retired man who stopped noticing things. When he answered, I said, I need help, and I need witnesses. I did not ask him to confront Evan. I did not ask him to threaten anyone. I knew better now. Clara had been right about me. If I made this about my rage, Evan would use it. So I made it about evidence. Within 30 minutes, Daniel arrived with his wife's old minivan and a retired dispatcher named Ruth, who carried a notebook like it was a weapon. Jesse agreed to stay too. He had planned to go home after mowing, but when I told him he might be the only reason we found Clara, he squared his shoulders and said, "Then I'll finish the job." Daniel parked down the street, with a dash camera running. Ruth sat on Clara's porch pretending to read a magazine while recording every pass of the truck. Jesse kept mowing, stopping every few minutes exactly as he had before, so nothing looked unusual. I stayed inside with Clara and Liam. At 5:30, Evan texted Clara, "Hope your conference is productive. Liam and I will have a great weekend." Clara stared at the message. "He doesn't know I have him," she whispered. "No," I said. "He thinks he is still in control." At 6:08, the black truck pulled into the driveway. Evan got out wearing a white shirt, clean jeans, and that same courtroom face I had seen too many times. Calm, reasonable, innocent. He knocked on the front door. Ruth's camera caught it. Daniel's dash camera caught it. My phone caught it from inside the hallway. Evan knocked again, harder. "Clara," he called. "I know you're in there." My daughter covered her mouth with both hands. He moved to the side gate. That was when Daniel stepped from his van. "Evening, Evan." Evan froze. Daniel smiled like a man greeting a neighbor, not catching a predator. "Beautiful evening for a drive, or 3. Evan's face changed so quickly, I almost missed it. The calm mask slipped, and underneath was something mean and panicked. "What are you doing here?" Evan snapped. "Watching a friend's street," Daniel said. "Perfectly legal." Ruth stood from the porch. "I've got the times written down if you need them." Jesse shut off the mower. 3 witnesses. 3 cameras. 1 man who had believed fear worked best in private. Evan looked toward the house. "Clara is violating the order." I opened the front door then. "No," I said. "You are." His eyes jumped to me. "Where is my son?" The way he said my son told me everything I needed to know. Not Lamb. Not our boy. My son, like possession, was the same as love. "You can speak to the court Monday," I said. "You think this is funny?" "No." I stepped onto the porch, but kept my hands visible. I would not give him the scene he wanted. "I think you came here believing nobody would be watching." "That was your mistake." His mouth tightened. For 1 second, I thought he might rush the door. Then a police cruiser turned onto the street. Ruth had called them the moment Evan pulled into the driveway. When the officers arrived, Evan changed again. Voice soft, hands open, concerned father. He said Clara was unstable. He said he was worried. He said I had always interfered. But this time, the private performance had an audience. Daniel showed the repeated drive-bys. Ruth showed the timestamps. Jesse told them about the crying under the house, and how he had called me, because something felt wrong. I showed them the call from Evan's unknown number, and the video of his truck slowing in front of the driveway. Clara came upstairs, only after the officers asked to see Liam. She carried him wrapped in the duck blanket, his cheeks flushed, his eyes heavy. Then Liam, then Clara. His face went pale with fury. "You set me up," he said. Clara's voice was tired, but steady. "No, Evan. You just showed up exactly where you weren't supposed to be, doing exactly what I said you had been doing." That was the first moment I heard my daughter sound free. The police did not arrest Evan that night. That disappointed the angry part of me, but Clara's attorney later said it was better that way. Evan left with a warning documented in a report, and every second of his visit to Clara's house became part of the emergency filing. Clara and Liam did not sleep in the basement that night. They came home with me. I put Liam in the guest room, where Clara had slept as a teenager. He was still feverish, but the medicine helped. Clara sat beside him until his breathing evened out, then came into the kitchen, where I had made coffee neither of us needed. For a while, We did not talk. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming and the soft tick of the wall clock Margaret had bought at a flea market 30 years earlier. Finally, Clara said, "I thought if I asked for help, it meant I failed." I looked at her across the table. "No," I said. "It means someone failed you before you asked." Her face crumpled. She put both hands over her mouth, and for the first time in months, my daughter cried without apologizing for it. I moved around the table and held her the way I had when she was 6 and scraped both knees on the sidewalk. Only this time, I could not kiss the hurt and make it vanish. I could only hold on until she remembered she was not alone. Monday morning came gray and wet. The courthouse smelled like old paper and raincoats. Clara wore a navy dress and carried 3 folders. I carried Liam's backpack and the duck blanket folded inside it. Her attorney, Marlene Reyes, met us near the metal detectors. Marlene was small, sharp-eyed, and impossible to intimidate. She looked at Clara and said, "You ready?" Clara glanced at Liam asleep against my shoulder. "Yes." Inside the courtroom, Evan sat with his lawyer, looking perfectly wounded. He had a bandage on one knuckle that had not been there Saturday. I would have laughed if the room had not mattered so much. His lawyer began by saying Clara had staged a dramatic scene to alienate Liam from his father. Then Marlene stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She entered the medical records, the daycare statement, the police reports, the screenshots, the audio recording, the doorbell footage, Daniel's video, Ruth's notes, Jess's statement, my phone record from Evan's unknown call. Piece by piece, Evan's quiet little kingdom of denial began to collapse. The judge listened for a long time. Evan tried to interrupt twice. The second time, the judge looked over her glasses and said, "Mr. Mallory, I strongly advise you to let your counsel speak for you." That shut him up. When Marlene played the recording, the courtroom changed. You keep acting like court papers are magic. They're not. People disappear every day. Even Evan's lawyer went still. Clara sat straight. Her hands trembled, but she did not look away. When the recording ended, the judge asked Evan one question. "Did you say those words?" Evan swallowed. His lawyer touched his sleeve, but Evan spoke anyway. It was taken out of context. The judge's face did not move. What context makes that statement appropriate? No one answered. By the end of the hearing, Evan's unsupervised visitation was suspended. A protective order was entered. All exchanges would be handled through a court-approved center. Evan was ordered to surrender Liam's passport, provide his current address, and stop coming within 500 feet of Clara's house, my house, or Liam's daycare. It was not the final victory. Life is rarely that neat. There would be more hearings, more bills, more nights when Clara woke up from dreams she would not describe. Evan would try new tricks because men like him mistake consequences for unfairness. But that Monday, for the first time in a long time, the law looked at my daughter and believed her. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The sidewalk shone silver in the weak afternoon light. Liam woke up and reached for Clara. "Mommy," he murmured. She lifted him, and he tucked his face into her neck. This time, she did not hold him like someone might rip him from her arms at any second. She held him like a mother allowed to breathe. Jesse became something of a family hero after that, though he hated when we called him one. Clara insisted on paying him for the unfinished lawn, plus extra. He tried to refuse until she said, "You heard my son when everyone else would have kept mowing." He took the envelope then. Daniel and Ruth kept sending statements, until Marlene told them she had enough evidence to fill a drawer. My old friend only shrugged and said, "Never hurts to have one more page." As for Evan, the revenge was not dramatic in the way movies make revenge look. There was no shouting scene in a restaurant. No grand speech while he collapsed in public. The revenge was better than that. It was boring. official, unforgiving. It arrived in stamped envelopes and court orders. It lived in supervised visitation rooms where he could no longer perform fatherhood without witnesses. It lived in legal fees and mandatory evaluations. It lived in the fact that every charming lie he had told about Clara now had to stand beside recordings, timestamps, and his own voice. Control had been his weapon. Documentation became hers. 3 months later, Clara and I went back to her house to clean out the basement. The mattress was gone. The bins were empty. The small lamp was unplugged. Sunlight came through the basement window because the blanket no longer covered it. Clara stood in the middle of the room for a long time. "I hated this place," she said. "I know. But it kept us safe. For a little while." She carried the duck blanket upstairs and placed it back in the cedar chest. Her fingers lingered on the fabric. "Mom would have been furious," she said. I smiled sadly. At Evan. At me for thinking I had to do it alone. That one hurt because it was true. Outside, a lawn mower started. Jesse was in the yard again, cutting neat lines through the grass under a bright, ordinary sky. Liam stood at the window with his stuffed rabbit under one arm, waving as if the sound of the mower had never been frightening at all. Clara came to stand beside me. "You know," she said, "if Jesse hadn't heard him." "But he did," I said. She nodded. "Sometimes life turns on a scream. Sometimes it turns on a whisper. Sometimes it turns on a young man decent enough to shut off a mower and listen." That day, I thought I was driving to my daughter's house to solve a mystery. Instead, I found the truth hiding under the floorboards. A frightened mother, a sick little boy, and a kind of fear no one should have to carry alone. But I also found something else. I found out that my daughter was not broken, she was strategic. She was tired, yes, terrified, yes, but broken, never. And even learned what men like him always learn too late. A woman who has been forced to hide will eventually come into the light carrying receipts. And when she does, even the darkest basement cannot protect the person who put her there.